Welcome back to the Shared Services Advantage series. In episode number 6, we covered how to build your shared services team, who to hire, how to structure it, and how to deliver that first win. But once shared service is up and running, demand starts picking up and fast. Suddenly, everyone wants in. Every department wants to offload their work, and if you're not careful, shared services becomes the default dumping ground. So today, we're breaking down how to manage intake without losing control. And we'll work through 3 practical steps. One being how to prioritize demand and build a 12 months roadmap, how to scope it properly and define what shared services owns and what stays in corporate, and then how to roll it out with structure and discipline. And joining me as always is my co-host Gyner Ozgul, CEO at Fortis Fire. Gyner, good to have you.
Hey, Yassin, nice to be here again as always.
Yes, I'm excited to dive right in and let's jump into step 1. So, prioritizing demand and building 12 months roadmap. Look, not every request deserves a yes, and not every request is ready. So, you've got to be selective. And that starts with a real intake process. Like we're talking about having folks fill out an actual form. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy, it's just the basics. What are they asking to centralize? What process does it impact? What's the current pain point? What are the volume, complexity, the frequency? Kind of like they need to lay it out. And one of the key also ask is what's the risk if we don't solve for it? And then you want to score it. You want to use whatever model works for your team, whether it's effort impact, matrix, readiness versus value. Just don't go off gut feel. And have a method to kind of how to prioritize. And once you've got your scores, that's when you want to turn it into a 12 months roadmap. And you might want to organize it by quarter. And you want to be explicit what's launching Q1, what's getting scoped in Q2, and what's waiting for resourcing or maybe even cleanup. And really, the output from this step is to have one roadmap, one source of truth, if I may say. Gyner, how do you keep the roadmap clean when every team thinks they're the top priority? How do you help the team prioritize and get clear on the impact and the effort that's needed and the readiness to move work into shared services?
Yeah, I think, in past episodes, we talked a little bit about this assumes you've gotten past the cultural challenges that always come up with that, like what happened to my job and all that. So make sure you've had those conversations to settle the people down on the cultural change of this. But assuming that, really where you should start is where is the organizational, like when I say problem can be opportunity too. That's a synonym in this case. So problem could be we have an AR challenge, our customers aren't paying us, we're way behind on calling our customers to do our collections. That's like a problem statement, and you like, hey, there's a place to start. Even though everyone else might be asking, that's probably the greatest need in the business. An opportunity might be, hey, look, we really need a outbound calling initiatives to proactively go chase leads with customers to drive revenue, right? So that's not really a problem, is more like an opportunity expedition. Very different ends of the spectrum. Like one is about collection activities and something a little bit, I'd say, less typically considered less interesting or attractive. One is like super cool and let's go drive opportunity and growth. But in each of those cases, you have a very specific need that's tied to some strategic need for your business, right? One might be growth oriented, one might be improving your cash collections efforts, right? Just make sure you properly define the problem you're trying to solve or opportunity you're trying to gain, and that those are tying back to some organizational goal that you have.
Right. And this is very helpful. And let's say you have these 2 cases, how do you prioritize which one to go with?
If you have both of them, they're both very different. So I'll start, now I'm going to put my CEO hat on for a minute. One is really about cash management, and the other one is
revenue.
Your revenue. Like what's your need? As the leader of the CEO hat, I always want to go generate more revenue. Like, if my CFO was on with me right now, he's like, no, the other one's more important, probably. I'm always revenue heavy. I'd say really you have to kind of look at what the need is. So let's just say you do have both those scenarios in front of you, but your business is growing a healthy 10, 12% organically year to date. Then I kind of would choose the cash side. Like, hey, there's a need there. Maybe your collections are a little behind. But maybe your collections are okay. They're not where you want them, but they're okay. But you do have a need to grow revenue, or you have a backlog of estimates or a backlog of quotes that you need to follow up with customers on, and you have this immediacy of revenue. Then I would go that direction, right? So it is a little bit about, again, what is strategically going on in your business and aligning the objective to that.
I like it. So strategic alignment and then impact. That's what you're saying. And you can almost put it on a matrix and use 1, 4, 7, 10. 1 being least priority or the lowest, and 10 being the highest, and then plot it on the matrix. And then you want to start where it's the highest impact, least effort, or in this case most strategically aligned and brings the most value to the organization. Very helpful. And again, there's no one way to really do it.
Yes.
But what's important is prioritize. Have a prioritization matrix in place. And once you've got, once you know what's getting done and when, the next step is really figuring out what shared services actually owns and putting that in writing. And this is where you want to define what shared services own and scope it in writing. And you want to avoid the trap of we kind of own it sometimes, all right? You need to scope every intake item like a real service engagement. And you want to think like a business unit, even if it's, the shared services center is in-house. It's not like a third-party vendor. And you want to start with the basics. What are the steps being transitioned? What are the jobs to be done? Literally outline them. So if it's collection, okay, you are, building the list. You're calling the customer. You're you're reviewing the credit policy or whatever that is. What are the steps being transitioned? What's staying with the business? What roles are involved? And who owns which part? Like literally, if in a customer service process, for instance, step 1, the intake, picking up the phone and taking in a service call, goes to the shared service center. But when it comes to the scheduling and putting the actual work order and job on the technician's calendar, that needs to stay local. And you want to be very clear, outline that. And what systems are in play? What systems are impacted? What are the success metrics? And what's the cost? If especially if you have you want to have an internal billing model where the shared service center, even though it's in-house, there is a billing model that they want to charge. They want to get clear on that. Now, if you're working with a BPO, that's very clear, and all of that needs to be captured in what we call a statement of work (SOW), even if it's internal. So that SOW should spell out the level of ownership, right? Are they just staffing it? Are they co-owning it, right? Or are they fully owning the process? What are the quality expectations? What are the escalation path? And what are the commercial terms? And really the output from this step is a signed SOW for every major request, whether, again, it's an internal shared service center or a third-party BPO partner that you're working with. Gyner, how do you make sure people are actually aligned before the work gets handed off, and there's proper thought process going into that statement of work to define what does success look like, and have the expectation written down so that there's doesn't turn into down the line later on it's like into some sort of a blame game, or you said so and I said so, and misalignment.
Yeah, you got to have some real clear expectations for what success looks like with the team and with your provider, right? So, as an example, in the AR example I had, like, how many calls is your provider going to make? At some point, those calls have to convert to actual success and cash collections on the AR side, right? So it's like, one thing is just make a phone call, make a note, and say, hey, I made more phone calls than you used to make. It's another thing for that to convert to actual action, right? Because you're trying to solve a real problem. So what is the objective? So when you have the objective defined, hey, I'm going to improve my cash collections efforts by $1 million in 90 days, making this up, right? How close to that objective do you get, or do you exceed that objective at the end of the 90 days? And be measuring continually, week to week, month to month. The first couple of months, you're going to have to be very good about those measurements and holding both teams accountable to that performance, right? Because it can't just be all the provider. It can't be all the shared service carrying the weight of that. Your internal team has to carry it too, to be like monitoring it, helping improve the process over time, seeing where the opportunities are, and reporting that back.
I love that. Yeah, so there are, maybe value creation objectives, bringing in cash. There are potentially also process level KPIs, like you said. What's the expected output? Now, obviously, that's a little bit more for a mature process, right? If you have those benchmarks, it's important to note that down. And a lot of times when you're starting this engagement, there is almost no baseline. There hasn't been for at least what we've seen in the lower middle market. These process level KPIs haven't, there's no historic data to go off of. So you want to make sure that you're also not throwing out some arbitrary numbers just because you want to have KPIs. And you can say, hey, we will define the KPIs in the next 90 days. We're going to baseline it. But yes, I do agree on what those, is it DSO? Is it productivity? Is it collection rate? What is it? And make sure that it's baseline. And then there is, to your point, Gyner, there's a proper cadence. And we'll get to talk about cadences and performance reviews in an upcoming episode, because that's a key factor to the success of the relationship. Because one of the biggest traps new shared services leaders fall into is the transition it and forget it, or set it and forget it. And there's no follow through. So that's a key point, and it's an entire episode. So
now, I mean, just on that though, like a key takeaway on that, and you agree, it's an entire episode. A key takeaway on that is your business is always changing, right? The idea that you're going to just set it and forget it is just, you're setting your shared service resources up for failure, right? Because you're not keeping up with the continual view of your work. Now, do you need to change it every week or every month? Probably not. But if, maybe a couple times a year, the opportunity to just revisit your process and make sure it still works and there isn't any issue or any slippage in a KPI, sure. But again, as you said, it's a full episode worth of detail there.
Exactly. And the level of involvement as a leader, yes, the cadence and the frequency is very different than the process owner. And we'll probably make that as the next episode. So now that you've got the scope of work defined, you've got assigned SOW, right? If it's with a vendor and MSA, the next step is, you want to actually transition the work. So let's talk about how you actually transition the work without dropping the ball. And that is literally executing and transition like a project with structure and clear rhythm. So it's not like a checklist someone passes off. It usually starts with the business process owner, right? You want to bring them in early before anything moves. Even though you're making those decisions at the executive level, you want to bring the team with you. Some of the, frankly, biggest mistakes we've seen is the leadership team makes a decision without informing the process owner, and then the change management happens or needs to happen, the next day. It's like, okay, we're moving customer service to the shared service center, and literally the process owner is notified on the day, and we're starting hiring next week, right? That's a recipe for disaster. So you want to make sure everyone's is aligned on the current state, the gaps, and what success looks like. And if there's hiring involved, you're not just centralizing the people that you have, but you're looking to hire others. You want to lock down a clear job description, and make sure that you're aligned on the responsibilities and the profile and what does an ideal candidate looks like. Same goes for defining KPIs, quality expectation, and what done actually looks like. Then you stand up your transition team, right? You need a project manager to run point. You need an SME for the knowledge transfer, because sometimes the process owner is not the expert, at least not across the entire area. If we're talking order to cash, and again, we're not thinking department, we're thinking process. So you have a process owner for the order to cash. Okay, who's the SME for billing? Who's the SME for collections? Who's the SME for customer service? And maybe there's further segmentation. Maybe in collection you have, street accounts versus corporate accounts or branded accounts or whatever you may call it. So you make sure that you have someone who's doing the actual work on the front lines identified for that knowledge transfer. Then you need to make sure that the IT systems are talking to each other to unlock the system access for the shared service center resources. And you need someone to prep the training, the QA forms, and the reporting. So now, if you're working with a BPO partner, they'll often bring their own PM and handle the hiring and everything we talked about. Your job is just to make sure that nothing's being lost in translation. But from there, once you have all of that, then you do the kickoff. You bring everyone together, the shared services team, the business owner, the corporate folks, and then the vendor if applicable. And then you walk through the SOW, you align on the scope, on the goals, the timelines, and what green looks like on the roadmap. And then the knowledge transfer kicks off, and the onboarding. And then you've got the new hires get trained, ideally by your SME. And then you launch what we call a nesting period, which is typically 7 to 14 days, where the new agents or the new resources, they are processing transactions live, but with hands-on coaching and shadowing, and with QA built in, to make sure before they go live that they've got that process proficiency to an acceptable level. And this is where you're setting up a weekly cadence, so that shared services and the business are in sync. And typically, this transition process, it depends on the process readiness, and do you have documentation, baselines, all of that. Could take anywhere from 30 to 60 days to transition a process. Now, as you get into a rhythm, it could be faster for an existing service line. If you're just adding headcount, that could be a lot faster. Could probably take weeks instead of months. But Gyner, I mean, you've ran these transitions. What's helped you keep them smooth, and what has derailed them when they weren't structured properly?
I'd say communication is the biggest, like the number one thing. You have to communicate. You have to over communicate, frankly, right? What derails it is when there's breaks in communication and you haven't established the accountability of communication. So there's the accountability of the metrics, which we talked about earlier, and then there's the accountability of the communication. The communication of who onshore is accountable for managing that as a partner with your shared service resource offshore. There's the accountability of who's communicating internally to the teams that are working together with that, who's communicating to the offshore resources that are helping you develop this, like who's communicating with the sponsors if there's an issue or an opportunity. Like there's got to be clear accountability on the communication side, or it does fall apart.
I love it. I love it. And this is typically handled by, or at least led by, the project manager. And typically communication is a weekly touch base call, an email that goes out after every touch base. There's a MS Teams or Slack channel, right, for real-time communication. There's a project board, actually, right? And whatever methodology you use, RAID or whatever, right? You're always calling out risk assumptions, issues, and dependencies, and you're running it like a real project, with real, dependencies, cadences, rhythms, RACI, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. And to your point, Gyner, a lot of times the breakdown is in communication. So fantastic call out. So, and that's it. If you want to scale shared services without losing the plot, this is the playbook. Prioritize with intent, build a 12 months roadmap, Make sure that you scope each process like a service, define the roles, the KPIs, the billing, and get the SOW signed. And once that all done, really transition it like a real project. Run it with structure, accountability, and a 30, 60, 90 day game plan. And that's how you turn intake into execution and keep shared service from becoming a black hole for every random ask. And in the next episode, like you mentioned, I think it's important to maybe shift gears and talk about what happens after go live. How do you not set it and forget it, and make sure that you reach steady state, and what does that steady state look like from that point on, and ensure continuous success so that then expansion happens. So we'll answer what does steady state look like, how do you keep things running well once the transition is done, and we'll talk about the operating cadence, the governance, and how you maintain alignment in a BAU state. Until then, make your days great. Gyner, thank you always for your practical insights.
Thanks, Yassin. Appreciate it.